Hello, and welcome to the YAGR team's final review of Fortnite by Epic Games. Our playthrough team has spent over 72 hours in-game. First things first, I'd like to extend a thank you to our subscribers and viewers, as this was our first set of reviews for our very first game, and the support we received was much appreciated and very helpful. Additionally, I'd like to extend a personal thank you to Epic Games, as they were willing to review and retweet our deep dive, which means a lot to us. Moving on to the actual review, now that that's out of the way, the first thing I'd like to discuss is the art assets and graphics in the game. I think that overall the game is beautiful. I don't think it went too far into the realistic, of course, and it's always got this kind of comic book, a little bit cartoony vibe, but that certainly doesn't detract from the charm of the game. In fact, I think it enhances it. It's rather unique. I don't think I've seen anything particularly quite like this, outside of maybe the closest thing being Borderlands 2 or the original Borderlands, but it is still significantly different from that and very enjoyable to look at. I think the art and graphics team at Epic Games' Fortnite crew has done a beautiful job with this game. That being said, not everything is hunky-dory in the art and graphics world. Some things that I've noticed moving through the game is the second region that you can get to, named Plankerton, has a lot of the reused art assets from the first region, known as Stonewood. Not everything is reused, however. There are some new things, and I think it might just be the case of a slow introduction to new assets, which has its ups and downs. I don't think this is a big issue, and I haven't noticed it detract from my gameplay very much. In fact, it helps me kind of understand the world around me and recognize what I do and don't want to grab. However, it can get a little tedious at times and not help the game's slightly repetitive nature. But I digress, and I still stand by my first statement that I love the way this game looks. Regardless of the reused assets, I think they fit perfectly. The way they mesh together in different ways more than makes up for the... I don't want to use the word limited because there's plenty of art assets, but I think that's the only word here to use. So we'll say choice and select number of art assets. The way they mesh together and can be seen in different scenarios, connected in different ways, etc., really helps to remove the concern of seeing the same assets used over and over. Not only that, but the maps have a fair to large variation in them, and there's different color shades and tones throughout the game, and everything is very bright, and, well, in the case of nighttime, not so much, but the color contrast is very nice, and as such, it brings this kind of feel of being able to very accurately and quickly understand and accept what's going on in the world around you. So I think they took something that was very high quality and didn't want to stretch it too thin, which I can respect, and it came out very beautiful. So overall, I would recommend this game if it was strictly based off of art and graphics alone. I think it's a wonderful looking game, and I can spend hours and hours and hours on it without complaining about how it looks. So, art and graphics, well done. Moving on to sound design, that is where no expense was spared from my position as a player. Everything has a unique to almost unique sound from the different types of guns. Each assault rifle sounds slightly different. The sound of the LMG rapid firing sounds crisp and nice and heavy and thick. It's great. The swinging and slashing of the swords, very apparent. It feels very cathartic and very connective. I love the sound design in the game, even down to the enemy and zombie sounds. The little baby zombies, children zombies, midget zombies, I'm not sure what they're supposed to be. We'll just say small zombies. The little small husks that jump and leap, the sound file that plays when they leap reminds me of the small compies from Jurassic Park, which terrified me as a child. So they are very creepy, and I think it is an excellent sound asset, and it highlights what I'm talking about when I say they worked very hard, clearly, on their sound assets and sound design, and have laid it into the game in a near perfect way, in my opinion. Everything sounds crisp, everything sounds relevant, and you can almost identify what's happening or going on just by sounds alone, which says a lot. So, sound design for the actual gameplay is great. Going into the music, I love the soundtrack for the game. It's simplistic to a degree, but it is beautiful sounding music on its own. It's not something I might put in a playlist when I go to the gym, but it fits what you're doing at the time. And as stated before in the first impressions overview, the real magic of the music in this game isn't necessarily the soundtrack itself, but the timing and cues of when specific tracks come to play. The music adds this additional layer of intensity or, you know, relaxedness when you sit and grind and farm materials instead, and it adds that level of magic, and it really immerses you and makes you feel, you know, comfortable. It elicits the emotion that is appropriate in what's going on in the game. And that is very difficult to do, especially in a high-paced game like this. So I think not only a good soundtrack, but the excellent pacing of that soundtrack has done wonders for the game. So highly recommend based on sound and art design alone. The last thing I want to mention for sound is the voice lines. I know in the deep dive we mentioned that a lot of the voice lines are overused a bit when you replay the missions. Outside of replaying the same missions over and over again, which you may find yourself doing, the voice lines are fairly unique. They're all excellently voice acted. Ashley Birch, yet again, as Ray, I have to say, wonderful job. She delivers her lines well as everyone else in the crew of voice actors for this. I don't think there's a single line that I said, wow, that's really hammy and poorly delivered. I think they were all well delivered. It just gets a little old hearing the same sound bites over and over again when it comes to specifically voice lines. But that's not really impacting my gameplay at all, and I can get over it. And as long as you continue to progress through the story and don't sit around and play the same level 30 times in a row, it's not going to be a particular problem. So I don't think it's necessarily a knock to the game, but if you're looking for something to improve Fortnite crew, that could be something. Add a little bit of variation to the sound bank for the voice lines. Moving on to the next thing I'd like to discuss is the progression and detailed menu system of the game. And this will go over things like tutorial systems and whatnot as well. We went very in-depth in our deep dive on this, so I won't do quite as detailed of a comment section on that, but I do want to bring up a few key points. The levels and complexity of progression within this game are astounding. They're gorgeous, and as someone who values those things as a longtime RPG player, I love it. The amount of time and different crews working on all those different components of the progression and synchronizing them so they work together perfectly for the sake of balance as well as logic must have been an immense project in and of itself, and that speaks volumes. I think that's very cool. Not only do you have the standard leveling up your character and leveling up your weapons and whatnot, but you also have the collection book as well as skill trees and research trees, etc., etc. Just the way they all interplay and the way it makes you feel like you're never at a deadlock stone wall for progression is very cool. I think that it speaks volumes and makes the game feel wonderful. It makes it feel like I'm always doing something to move forward. And a lot of games out there, you end up getting stuck in a rut and doing the same thing over and over and over and over again with no hope of progressing until you do it 20 or 30 times. I don't get that feeling in this game. I feel like, well, I might have to do this a couple times, but each time I do it, I'm getting something useful out of it. So the progression in this game is excellent. There's just so many options, so many layers, and they all fold perfectly into each other. It's great. The menu system itself is difficult to grasp, but easy to continue using. There's a lot of double clicking involved, and there's some rather unintuitive keyboard shortcuts for those things that you can access through double clicking. It might be worth revisiting the hotkeys or stopping and looking at what is really worth a double click versus a single click. You know, and that's getting into the real nuts and bolts of the game. That's breaking it down. I understand that this is still early access, but It's something that has to do with ease of use for the player, and the player should feel comfortable when they're playing their game. That's what they paid money for, is to be able to feel comfortable and enjoy what they're doing. When they have to sift through a bunch of menus, double-clicking 6 times just to get one thing done, it's kind of an ass pain. It gets a little annoying, so maybe revisit the quality of life through the menus in that regard, but again, that's not a serious complaint, because you can still get everything you need to done, and it's not, you know, game-breaking, and it's not going to ruin someone's experience because they have to click a couple extra times. It's a really tiny complaint that should not turn anyone off from the game, but it's something that should be brought up because some people may find it annoying after, you know, 72 to 128 hours of gameplay. Just something to keep in mind. More specifically in regards to the menu system and things like that, going back and checking out some of the art assets for some of the tooltips and icons needs to be improved as far as fidelity. Some of the graphics and things aren't crisp or clear. That was mentioned in the deep dive, but that's so easy to replace and fix. That's not going to detract from the quality of the game overall, yet again. You'll notice a theme here as I go through this. This game, any of the problems that are brought up with it are super minor, nitpicky stuff. It's really irrelevant to the primary gameplay. The core concept and core mechanics of this game are well executed and well thought out. There's a couple of points of crispness that need to be, you know, rolled up and fixed, but outside of that, the only issues are very small concerns. The game overall is... the best way I can describe it is the game overall is a gem. I think it's gorgeous, I think it sounds great, and I think it functions great. Moving off of the menus, because we went into that plenty in our deep dive. If you're interested in hearing more about it and the progression system, please go check that video out. We're going to go on to the actual gameplay within missions. The queuing system is very intuitive. The mission select map is gorgeous and functions beautifully. It tells you volumes of information in a tiny, tiny space, which is super valuable as a gamer. I want to know as much information as I can, as fast as I can when I'm playing a game, and particularly when I'm selecting a mission. I don't want to have to sit there and read paragraphs for each mission, and I certainly don't. They did an excellent job with the queuing and mission selection system. And then actually getting in the mission, having the ability to change and alter all of the things related to what you're going to be doing in the mission at the mission party organization screen is great. You can change your primary hero and all of your side stuff right there with a couple clicks of the mouse button. Very nice, very ease of use. That's going to be a theme that's coming in here. They hit the nail on the head with that. It's comfortable for players to get it done outside of the clicking functions that we discussed before and the kind of odd hotkeys. But it's so convenient and wonderful. I think it helps players a lot, and it gives us a lot of freedom to change on the fly what we want to do before we jump into a mission. So that's excellent. Getting into the mission itself and the gameplay overall, it pains me to say this, but the gameplay can be a little repetitive. There are plenty of missions. There's lots of variety in missions, from storm shield defense to helping a van take off into the sky, to just running around and killing husks, to building radar towers. I could go on and on. There's plenty of different mission types, but the way you go about each mission type is fairly similar. You either need to build a base or you don't need to build a base. Missions that you need to build a base, you have to go around and collect blue glow, and then you build the base, activate the machine, and defend it. Missions where you don't have to build a base, you either gotta go around and build other stuff, or you just gotta go around and shoot zombies. The complexity of the actual gameplay is more in the nuances and the minutia of it. That being said, the overall course you're going to take in any given mission typically resides in collect resources, build base, shoot zombies. Collect resources, build base, shoot zombies. It's a little repetitive. I have a sneaking suspicion that that will not remain true throughout the entirety of the game, as there are 4 zones. Not only that, but I'm sure the Fortnite crew already has an immense amount of ideas on how to expand upon and increase the variety of gameplay and how things are done. But that being said, what they do have is very clean. this system that they have of going through collecting, building the base, and defending the base has been refined, it has been tweaked, and it has been damn near perfected. To the point where I don't care that I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I enjoy it. I think it's awesome. It has a bit of a grindy feel, but as a long-term RPG player, that's not a problem for me. That could be a problem for folks who are more the kind of FPS heavy or fighting games heavy style players where they just want to get in, enjoy the action, and then get out. The fact that you have to craft your own bullets and weapons and have to take into consideration tower defense-esque mechanics kind of detracts from the jump straight into the action feel that some players are looking for. So consider that if you're looking into Fortnite and that's your kind of playstyle. However, the action in this game is excellent. I don't mind having to do a little bit of legwork in order to get to the awesome action in the game. That's what we're going to get into next, is the gameplay of gunplay in Fortnite. The gunplay, as well as the melee weapon play, is fantastic. The feedback is excellent, from sound to graphic feedback. The feel and motion of shooting your gun, getting the headshot, the visual feedback you get from the headshots and body shots is excellent. The terror you get when certain zombies come charging at you, or, you know, building your internal priority process for what you do and don't want to kill. It speaks volumes to the nuanced tactics that are required in being effective in this game. And I think that becomes exceedingly important as the difficulty increases. And there is definitely a difficulty curve in this game. If you try to go do something that you are not prepared for, especially alone, you will find yourself struggling. And I think that's awesome. I think there should absolutely be a difficulty curve, especially in a game like this. It should not feel like you're doing the same thing and it's not getting any tougher. As you progress, the game absolutely gets tougher, not only with the type of zombies they throw at you, but also the mix. They start throwing more variety of zombies at you, and it gets crazier and crazier to have to manage prioritizing targets, and not only that, but throwing in additional people, into your team can present its own challenge, especially when you're not a cohesive group. More often than not, I'll have people running in front of my line of fire and charging into the middle of a pack of zombies, and I have to go and save them, or sometimes I find myself out alone in the boonies and I need some help too. So the nuance of tactics and positioning in this game when it comes to combat is very tactical. It pays to think through what you're doing and strategize. And I think that's great. That means that the enemy AI is solid, and the mechanics for the game do not make you as the player feel invincible whatsoever. You are generally concerned for your character's life throughout the game, and you want to maintain the fact that you did not go down. You're not the guy that held the team back. So, I think the gameplay with regards to AI and the tactics of the actual gunplay is excellent, as well as the feel of the guns and the feel of the enemies trying to overcome the challenge of them. That covers art and graphics, sound design, the menu and progression system, as well as the gunplay. Next, I want to discuss construction. The construction mechanic in the game is reasonably complex, and that is a natural feature of something that allows you to take up so much control of the world around you. Not only is most of the world destructible and provides you with valuable resources, but you yourself have the ability to add on to the world and manipulate your pathways. This is very unique and creative, and I love that it is such a core mechanic of the game. However, there are a few things that I do wish were either changed or included or improved upon about the mechanic. The first thing that comes to mind is I would truly like there to be a way to deconstruct something that I have placed down without having to break it with my pickaxe and get no refund. A lot of times I'll accidentally put something down that's the wrong material, or I'll put the stairs the wrong way because I tried to move the camera to get a better angle to place it to make sure everything was right and lined up, etc., etc. Even if it's only a 10-second window or something immediately after it, I think that would be a nice little quality of life feature to add. Otherwise, you have to be very precise and careful with what you place down. You still want to be precise and careful, and changing up or adding some mechanic to allow you to undo something wouldn't remove that important preciseness, but it would allow players to make mistakes, as we all do, especially while learning, and not feel punished for it. I think that would be very helpful. The upgrading system for materials is very cool. I love the graphic change when you upgrade stone from level 1 to 2 to 3, and metal and wood respectively. I think it's very cool to see a physical change in something for dumping more resources into it. And I also think that it is very important mechanically to the game that that exists, as it has some very impactful effects on the material and the structures that you build. But really being able to change those kinds of mistakes would be extremely helpful. Another thing that would be convenient is when it comes down to placement of traps. I understand the reason for not being able to move traps around actively. That would kind of defeat the purpose of dumping resources into it and thinking ahead of your defense. But sometimes I'll end up cycling onto a healing pad when I thought I had a couple more floor spikes or something ready to go, and all of a sudden I have this healing pad in a really awkward position, and in order to remove it, I have to break the floor and I lose the healing pad. Therefore dumping all of the healing pad resources as well as the floor resources down the drain. I understand this speaks to precision and planning, which is a big mechanic of the game. However, it is very frustrating to see that many valuable resources lost because of a small, simple mistake that I had no control over because it automatically switches the trap. So maybe force players to select the new trap, or enable you to, within 10 seconds, pick up a trap that you just put down. That would be pretty nice. Other than that, the trap mechanic is nice. They operate and function perfectly. The upgrading system feels impactful for them just as well for the guns and the heroes. You can feel them doing more damage. You can see them shooting faster. It's excellent. I think the traps are quality. I think there's a reasonable variety of traps in the game now, and I can't wait to see what other crazy ideas they come up with to add to the game later. And overall, I think the trap mechanic works, but much like the construction mechanic, it would be very, very nice to have a little bit of freedom to make a mistake here and there and not feel punished for it. Overall, I think the trap and construction system is wonderfully done. It is a very difficult system to get right, and I think they've damn near got it with a couple minor adjustments and fine-tuning. It would be interesting if they tried to expand it to enable more different kinds of shapes and even sizes of structures. And frankly, I wouldn't ask that of them because that would make the game very difficult and provide something very awkward to balance around. So I think the structures that you have and shapes that you have available now are going to be more than efficient, and I wouldn't ask them to jump through hoops about that as a player, because that sounds like a can of worms. I'm not a game designer, and that sounds like a can of worms I do not want to see opened. So overall, I think the construction and trap mechanic is excellent. It just needs a little bit of quality of life improvement, much like a few of the other points in the game. I have no serious complaints about that. And that is going to lead us into the kind of grindy feel of the game that I had mentioned before. You have a lot of times where you'll go in and use a bunch of your resources to get something done, and then you're completely out of resources and you have to spend a couple missions just going around and clearing the map to refill your inventory of wood and stone and metal. I understand the mechanic and I think it's great. I personally love farming. I can't tell you how many hours in WoW I've spent digging metal nodes or skinning monsters, etc., etc. I don't mind the grinding, but I think, again, something that would be convenient, and this sounds like something that you could make into a skill or even put a cap on to give players another layer to progress from, is the ability to transfer materials and supplies from your in-game mission inventory to your bank space. I think that'd be really cool to add. I don't think it's necessary at all, but I think that would be something fun to look into, because that would effectively enable people to farm past the 999 cap in a given mission and enable them to prepare to build their storm base without having to jump in and out of a bunch of different loading screens over and over again. I do understand the need for a specific cap within mission, though, and don't think that that is a problem whatsoever. 999 is plenty of resources to get any given mission done within the game thus far, so I don't think that's where the problem lies. I just think being able to transfer remotely would be very cool. After all, in the intro video, we were shown being teleported a gun, so I don't see why reverse teleporting would be a problem as far as the game's logic would go. Another thing regarding resources that I'd like to bring up is there are a fairly large number of crafting resources in the game. I think that's cool, because that means you're not too dependent on one thing or another, with one or two key exceptions such as nuts and bolts, which is used not only for ammo but for traps as well. You'll find yourself trying to find those little buggers everywhere, but that's okay. Sometimes you need that common limiting factor in order to make players have a goal to search for. I understand that and don't think that's a problem. In fact, I think it encourages players to prioritize and look for specific things in the map, which is pretty cool. Instead of just saying, hey, here's a world, do what you want with it, you're kind of helping guide their hand a little bit, and I, for one, appreciate that as a player. Not everyone will, but it has its place. That being said, the point I want to bring up about the crafting materials and mechanic is I have a surplus of crafting materials that I don't understand why I have so much of. They're classified as rare or uncommon ingredients, and I just have backpacks full of them. I don't need to make that many guns. I've found a couple that I really like, and I'd like to continue to use those and dump points into those to upgrade them. In fact, that's the best way to make the progression system work. So if I don't need these specific materials to make the couple of guns and traps that I really do want to use, they end up taking up a lot of space in my backpack, and I have to periodically find myself dropping them on the floor, and that literally translates to wasted time, because I spent time to gather those resources. I think a cool mechanic to enable avoiding this problem is allow the players to convert these quote-unquote rarer materials into your base building materials, such as I have 4 stacks of rusty mechanical parts. I really only want to keep one on my person at any given time. Why not let me change those, I don't know, in a 5-for-1 trade scenario into metal? Because there's plenty of metal on most of the maps and I can go and get it anyway. But I have the materials on me right now, and it would not be a tough logical leap to turn those into one thing from the other. Same thing with things like stringy twine. You bundle it together, you can effectively make a bundle of tough sticks or reeds. That could be construed as wood, and you could do a 5-to-1 ratio for that, or something that your balance team determines. That would make the grind and delayed feeling of the game and repetitiveness of gathering the resources, which is going to turn a reasonable number of players off, into a more reasonable expectation. If you had that mechanic in there, I don't think it would be a big complaint. But right now, as the game stands, it is very dependent on going in and performing the same repetitive tasks in order to maintain a proper supply of resources, and then dumping a bunch of stuff that you got that you're never going to use or are highly unlikely to use. It can get very frustrating because I spent the time to get that and I'm not using it. It's kind of like spending a lot of energy to get something done and then finding out you didn't need to do it at all. So that's my biggest complaint about the resources, and I think that and the tutorial system are the 2 major glaring issues with the game currently. I said I'd talk about the tutorial system a little earlier, and I'm going to bring it up now. As Epic Games has already stated, they are aware that their tutorial system needs work. They're also aware that the game in general is a work in progress, especially in the respect of the UI and tutorials. I appreciate that they are willing to admit this, as I have stated in my deep dive video, and I can respect that, and in fact value Epic Games more as a company because they are willing to share that information with us. I think that is very kind of them. They did not need to tell the public that, but they did anyway, which is awesome. They are very transparent as a company with regards to Fortnite, and I think that is extremely valuable as a game player. But their tutorial system needs work. I've said it before, I'll say it again. And I think it's fairly simple, some very intuitive improvements that can fix it. So I'm not going to go do that breakdown of how to do it. I did that in the deep dive, but the 2 largest glaring issues I have with the game right now is the tutorial system and the resource management, pardon me, gets pretty repetitive, and there are some very, very simple things you can do to fix that, to where it doesn't break the game, and there's still player sacrifice coming into play, but it's not spending hours farming the same thing, performing the same repetitive task. Overall, those are our fairly minor things. If those are the biggest complaints of the game, that means the core of the game mechanically is excellent. The game looks beautiful. The game sounds amazing. And it's very hard to put down. It's got an addicting aspect to it. I love playing the game. Even with the couple complaints that I've listed, that does not stop me from putting hours and hours and hours into this game and staying up late with my buddies killing some husks. And that means that the game's core is excellent. It's got pretty much everything I want from a tower defense and a third-person shooter that I can play with my friends. And it makes me happy. When I go online and I start playing it, I'm excited to play it. It's like I'm playing an RPG, a shooter, and a tower defense all in one. And that is super cool. I think they've meshed quality points of all of these things, and frankly, I'm not surprised one or two very tiny details slip through the cracks and need to be improved. If they didn't slip through the cracks, then I would be concerned that some other kind of dark magic was going on. So, Epic Games, you nailed it with Fortnite. Just continue to provide the excellent support you have to the community as well as your game, and you're going to fix all of the tiny little details that might be considered problems by some players, and you're going to have this gem of a game by the time you want to make it free to play in 2018. Listen to your community, and I think everything will go the right way for you. This is a great game. That being said, thank you very much for listening to YAGR's final review of Fortnite by Epic Games. Overall, I would say anyone with any kind of interest in wave defense, tower defense, third-person shooter multiplayer, or anything that Fortnite looks like it would represent, if you have an interest in that, I highly recommend you pick up Fortnite, whether it's now or when it goes free to play. It is a very well-designed game that is truly beautiful and enjoyable to play. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you online soon.